we're going to get Alvin Attles Jr. on. He's the son of a living legend, Al Attles Sr., who, by the way, went to North Carolina A&T. And
Really?
then got drafted. Yeah, he did.
Wow.
And then he got drafted by the Philadelphia Warriors, and he's been a Warrior ever since 1960, which means he's been a part of the Warrior organization for almost 65 years. And let's welcome in Alvin Attles Jr. Hey, Alvin, how you doing, buddy? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And can I quickly say something? I wanted to make sure because for all the callers who think you're just the contrarian and what if Jordan Poole's stats were padded and what if, do we really need to pay Ayuk that much? If for those who think you're just the contrarian, Matt, you've been a stand-up guy who supported me for so long, and I just wanted to thank you. I mean, 20 years ago, I remember asking you to come to a basketball clinic in American Canyon, and you did. So I wanted to just thank you.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. In fact, and I'll just go this way. There was this camper there that day called named Logan Murdoch, who ended up becoming a sports writer. He now works for, I believe, The Ringer, and covered the Warriors for a while. And he brought it up to me about 6 years ago that he was at that camp that I spoke at. So that was a great little full circle moment. So go ahead. Why don't you let us know what's going on with your dad? Because as far as I'm concerned, he's a living legend. He's an icon in the Bay.
Well, thank you. So what I'm doing is, a lot of time we just think we have a ton of time. And 10 years ago, I started a project just documenting his life. And so I'm almost complete, but I am putting the final touches on what is called The Destroyer. So it's a love letter to my dad in film form. And we're just putting the kind of final touches on it. And it's a behind the scenes look at, I think a lot of people see this brooding kind of menacing figure and he's the destroyer and he's a fighter and he's all those different things. But there was so much more to him. He's an intellect. He's somebody that fought the game. He's somebody that through his hard work stayed in the game for a long time, and he has a bevy of friendships that I could only wish to some point in my life come close to. So I am doing The Destroyer. So it is something that we're super proud about.
Well, first off, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you, and I really appreciate you joining us. And I did want to ask, so I come from a bit of a younger generation, and I've only had the chance to read about your father, to listen to some interviews. I'm obviously familiar with his career on paper, but boy, I'm excited to watch the documentary, and I hope that you could kind of help me with this. What are you hoping that someone like myself, who's from a different generation, from a bit of a newer generation, what are you hoping that we can glean and learn about through this documentary and learning about your father?
Well, so what happens is we're in a microwave society, right? We want everything done quick. The newest is the greatest. Anything past our scope of sight is old school. I really want to bring a new set of eyes to, my father's generation, how he impacted not only, his players, but he impacted coaches and those in the organization. And my dad grew up in a very unique time frame. You're talking about, the civil rights era. You're talking about era when basketball players weren't getting paid inordinate amount of money. So what they had to do was they had to do it for passion. So I want folks like yourself just to see kind of the sacrifices that it took for him to get here. And one thing that, and God bless Steve Kerr, I saw him on the Democratic National Convention last night, and we kind of credit coach, and rightly so, with the strength in numbers, but back in 74, 75, my dad was playing 10 or 11 guys at a time. Mm-hmm. That was unheard of at that time, to play so many guys. And so I want the newer generation just to kind of get a little bit more appreciation for what pioneers such as my dad have laid out.
Alvin, and we're talking to Alvin Attles Jr. We're talking about his father, Al Attles Sr., who, of course, his resume's off the charts, Hall of Fame. He was a championship coach in 1975. He was on the court when Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points at Hershey Park. He was a player coach for the Warriors. And today we started out the show talking just about coaches and what we like in a coach and what we prefer and maybe what we don't prefer. How would you describe, because it's been a while now, how would you describe your father's style as a coach back in the mid-'70s? What was he like?
So my father was the ultimate players coach, meaning he was a guy that he would, and I know because I'm his son, and he had some fire and brimstone to him, meaning like he was not afraid to get up under guys, challenge them loudly, but what he did was he always talked to them in a way so that all the players understood what he was asking from them and what he challenged them for. And so my dad he was, I would say, a combination between and he wasn't a yeller, but he was very commanding. So he's a combination between a commanding coach, but very, very understanding because he had also played the game. And if you remember this, because they no longer do this, he was a player coach. Yep. So he had both of those facets of, of technique in his delivery as a coach. He understood what it was to be a player, understood what it was to be a coach. And so I think he was just very well balanced as a coach.
And Alvin, how would you compare his style to someone like Steve Kerr's now? Because we were discussing the things that I find incredible about Kerr and the way that he's able to be just forthcoming and honest, whether it's at a political convention or in training camp at practice. He feels like the same person. How would you compare your father's styles to someone like Steve Kerr?
You know what? I think that's a wonderful, and thank you for that comparison. I think it's actually a great comparison because what I've noticed about Coach Kerr are the same things I noticed about my father. Like Coach Kerr knows how to reach a Steph Curry, right, who is the best player on your team. And he knows how to get Steph motivated, but he also knows how to go down and tap a guy like, let's look at some of the guys who, Otto Porter, for instance. You look at guys who are also ran somewhere else and they get here and coach knows how to speak to them and get them to perform. My dad did a lot of quote unquote reclamation projects, and whether or not it was Bernard King, whether or not it was World Free, whether or not it was players who had gone other places and not necessarily reached their potential and got here, and my father breathed something into them that allowed them to go ahead and flourish. That's a skill set, but he also knew how to take care of his best players, his Ricks, his Wilts, his guys like that. So that's a very, very appropriate comparison, and one that I think is very accurate.
Hey, Alvin, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to let us know when the documentary comes out, and we're all looking forward to it, and give the best to your dad because he's one of the classiest individuals I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm proud to have known him a little bit.
And thank you, and I'm sure he will appreciate that. If I could just tease, for anybody that wants to support the documentary, we're doing a Kickstarter just to kind of get some finishing support. And so go to Kickstarter. The documentary is called The Destroyer, the Al Attles Legacy. And feel free to, we have some great, one-of-a-kind items for those who contribute. So we are looking for some finishing funds, but I appreciate the time, and I hope that folks will appreciate what we put together and come out and see it.
Can't wait, Alvin. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and for having me, and I'll make sure that I tell my dad. He's actually listening right now, so I appreciate you all.
Love you, Al. Thank you.
All right, love
both
you too.
of you guys. Appreciate it,
thank
man.
You. All right, bye-bye now.
All right, Alvin Attles, Jr.
It's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, Alvin Attles Sr. is unbelievable. Can I tell you a little story about Alvin Attles Jr.?
I'm a fly on the wall.
This is the one that you just it's just a coincidence, but I don't know. I'll never forget it. So he was on the court. He was a teammate of Wilt Chamberlain's in 1962 when Wilt scored 100 points at Hershey Park, Pennsylvania.
He was the second leading scorer in the game, right?
17 he had that night. And they played that game in Hershey because back in those days they would play some games at neutral sites and at different types of sites. Well, that was in 1962. So fast forward to 1975, and I'm a young kid, and they used Hershey Park Arena for high school playoff games. And I went to Hershey Park Arena 50 times watching basketball games. So then we move forward to when I first started working covering the Warriors in 90, about 95, and I get to know Al Attles. And now I'm going to do a story on him and Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. And he was telling me about the game, and he and Wilt drove down to Hershey from New York. Wilt was living in New York even though he was playing for the Sixers. Anyway, long story short is they get to Hershey Park Arena at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon for a 7 o'clock game, and everybody's just killing time. And Al Attles told me that the one thing he remembers, he said, the one thing I remember is, he said, I know you're not going to believe this, but, and nobody ever believes this, but Hershey Park had a game room with pinball machines. And I said, yeah, I know. I've been in that game room a million times. We used to always get to the games early, and I don't know why, but on the second level, they had a game room. It was a small game room with pinball machines and a shooting gallery and a couple other games like that. And he told me that the one thing he remembered from that 100-point game was Wilt had spent like an hour or an hour and a half in the game room playing one of those gun games where you would, it's like a shooting gallery game. And Wilt was doing great that day with the shooting gallery game. And I don't know, I just thought, oh my God, that's unbelievable that I was in that game room playing the pinball machines when I was 13 years old. And here's Al Attles, who was a teammate, telling me that on the day he scored 100 points, he was in that same game room messing around, killing time. I don't know. It just, it was pretty cool.
Oh, it's almost like he couldn't miss that night.
That's a 4.
I do want to ask you a question about Al Attles, though, because I've seen this pop up a couple times, and I myself am just curious. Why is his nickname the Destroyer? Because that's also the name of the documentary.
Yeah, because he was tough. He was known as one of the toughest players in the league. Plain and simple.
But he wasn't that big.
No,
right?
no. But he was tough. He was a really good defensive player. He was hard-nosed. He was the type of player that guys didn't like going up against. And, I mean, the famous story is when, I think it was Game 4 of the 1975 NBA championship against the Bullets, when he got thrown out because he ran onto the court to get involved in a fight. It was Rick Barry, and who was it? Was it Kevin Lockery? No, it was somebody else. It wasn't Kevin Lockery. Somebody was trying to bait Rick Barry, and they started to square off, and then Al came out, and Al ended up getting ejected. I'm sure somebody will hit us up on the text line.
You don't see that anymore. Name. A head coach rushing to midcourt.
No. All right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so appreciate Alvin Attles Jr. coming on. We'll be sure to check out the Destroyer documentary. Let's go.
And again, too, you can go to Kickstarter.com and look for The Destroyer, the Al Attles Legacy. I'm looking at the site right now, so you can go donate money to help the project.
All right. Let's jump back into it with coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to go down to Santa Clara and hear from Kyle Shanahan. He's addressing the media, and we'll take that live, and then we'll react to it. In the meantime, let's go to Bob. Bob's in San Francisco, been waiting patiently. What's up, Bob? How you doing, man?
Hey, guys, I love the show.
Oh, thank you.
Nice. I believe, hands down, Bill Walsh, not because of the Super Bowls, but because of his technical aspect of the game and plus his teaching. I mean, I've met a few different 49ers in my travels, and I was always appreciated that. And it was his teaching skills that I kind of got into their mind a little bit and asked, and they said, man, he was a great teacher, and he expected a lot out of you. But anyway, Bill Walsh to me. But as my favorite, I agree with you, Seifert. Seifert I loved. He was amazing, that guy. But and then I want to touch a little bit on Kerr.
Yeah.
Talking at the DNC there. So I think, with the climate of everything happening today, he's kind of compelled to go out there anyway and view his opinions. And if it turns off fans, well, don't watch the games. But, I mean, we're all entitled, right? So the bottom line is, do we want to continue this experiment, or do we want to, end it? Do we want to run it down? So that's the choice, and that's how I see it. So I think he was compelled to go out there and do his thing.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
No, thanks. That's a big part of it. And thanks, Bob. Appreciate the call. Like, Steve Kerr clearly got asked to speak.
He said he got asked.
Should he have said, no, I can't. I can't speak because it'll be too controversial?
Well, I think that's why he began his speech with talking about it. It's like, and he iterated why. He felt like it was too important to not speak. And look, he generally picks his spots. I mean, he's not, campaigning every single day, but I do think he understood the importance of winning the gold. And he said as much. I think he said it was, the most proud he's ever felt in his life. And to share that with someone like Steph Curry, I'm sure was also really special. He had the chance to coach LeBron and coach Durant again and coach an incredible all-time team. But I also imagine there's probably a lot of civic pride when he was over there. And he also talked about going back the next day in the same arena and watching the women's team take home the gold, and how, the best 24 players in the world, he just felt extremely proud to be an American and watch those players accomplish what they did. So, sure, he could have said no, but maybe he felt like that was the patriotic thing to do.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe he also thought it was patriotic to go after Waltz's coaching methods in 1999 and against Mankato East.
Yeah, I mean, you said he was coaching the 12 best players. Maybe he didn't think so. That's why he didn't play Tatum. Maybe Tatum's not a top 12 player.
Well, maybe he was just the 12th.
But see, that's it.
Or the 11th. Halliburton didn't play either.
I mean, that's one of the things I like about Steve Kerr is
they don't play Derek White over Jason Tatum.
No. That I think a big thing is how coaches take criticism, or how they can't take criticism. And I think it's obvious that Steve Kerr knows that he gets criticized by some, and rather than be defensive, like, why isn't he defensive? Why does he acknowledge some mistakes that he made? Or why does he even go out of his way to let fans know, oh, yeah, that was a really tough decision, and looking back on it, maybe I should have gone in another direction. I mean, I can't imagine, and maybe it's unfair, I can't imagine Kyle Shanahan doing that. What makes Kyle Shanahan a little more defensive than Steve Kerr? Is it the fact that Steve Kerr's got titles left and right as a player and as a coach, and now he just kind of doesn't give a crap anymore? And Kyle Shanahan is still making his way in the coaching world, even though he's been here 7 years, and he hasn't been able to win the big one. And that's why he is, let's say, what would you say, a little more prickly about people who question his techniques and his decision making.
I think it is about winning. I mean, and I think it comes down to confidence. Kerr, based on how open he is, I'm not sure if people really get just how confident of a person he is and how competitive of a person he is. Because when he tells it to you, it doesn't sound like it. And when we think of competition, I think a lot of people think of, I don't know, Draymond Green or Michael Jordan or people that are in your face. Harbaugh, for example, big rah-rah guys. Steve Kerr's not a rah-rah guy. But that doesn't mean he isn't insanely competitive. It's a bit like Curry. I'm not going to compare them as players, but as far as competitors, I don't think people just understand how psychotically competitive a person like Stephen Curry is. And he'll show you sometimes, and he can't really contain it sometimes. But then when you see him at the podium, he's just able to turn that switch off, and not many people can do that. So I think that Curry, it does come down to how competitive he is, but also he knows that no matter what, you can't strip him of 9 championships.
Right.
You can't strip him of the experiences he's had learning from great, certifiable Hall of Fame all-time coaches. It's not as if he doesn't know what he's doing. And sometimes he's wrong, and he's willing to admit that. But that's probably because he's also seen someone like Greg Popovich admit fault. He's seen someone like Phil Jackson admit fault.
maybe behind closed doors.
Sure. And maybe that's his way of furthering that lineage. That's who Steve Kerr is. That's not really who Popovich is.
Not at all.
Although, if you do catch him in a moment, just, because I have once or twice.
Oh.
Whoop.
Who, Popovich?
Yeah, I've had a back and forth with Pop.
Oh.
Yeah, at the podium, pregame, 2 years ago.
Oh, did you press him?
Well, I asked him about Kerr. It was a bit of a layup. Oh. And then he tried to throw it back in my face. And
well, can you elaborate, please? Specifics.
Well, so it was, I don't know, one of the Brett Favre moments of him saying, yeah, I'm thinking about retiring at the end of the year, and I'm, considering stepping away. So it might have been Popovich's final return to Golden State. So someone asked Kerr about it in the pregame interview before. You talk about coaches talking too much. Sometimes it is great that they do talk all the time because you never know when there's going to be something relevant to ask them about in regards to basketball. So Popovich, who I'd bet have been making his last trip to Golden State, Kerr was asked about him before. He was reverential. He was very, kind and talked about how great he was and how big of an influence he was in his life. So I decided that I would go to the opposing press conference and just simply regurgitate what Steve Kerr said.
Pepper him?
Yeah, pepper him with sugar. Basically just say, hey, here's what Steve Kerr had to say about you. And before I could even get the quote out, he goes, oh, he called me an a-hole, didn't he? He said I was... He said I wasn't worth this, something joking like that. And I said, he actually left that part out. But what he did say was, and then I just explained the quote, and you could tell he was a bit uncomfortable. And so then there was one more follow-up thing he had to me, and I just said, honestly, I just kind of want to know your thoughts about Steve. And then he did go into like a minute-long explanation of how important Steve Kerr was to him. So it's like you had to break down the wall at first. But then once you got him in a moment, he finally was actually pretty cool.
Kind of like Belichick.
Yeah, just like him.
Belichick is not the same person that we're seeing this year that he's been at the podium for the last 20 years. I mean, that's for sure. So